Yes, that's right. It's inevitable, isn't it, that after an election wipeout, the one that the Democrats suffered last November, it's inevitable that there is going to be a period of reflection, if not silence, from them as they try to work out what to do. That's the case with any party that suffered such a blistering defeat. The interesting thing with the Democrats, you say that they seem to be leaderless. That's really because they are. It can't be stressed. In the American system, there is Kamala Harris and what's his name? Oh yeah, Waltz. What happened to them? They drifted away after the election thumping that they got, and it's not like any of the Democratic Party wants to hear very much from either of them after having led them to that defeat. And then the rest of the party, you've got Minority Leader Senator Schumer, who has been castigated by his party for making a budget deal with the Republicans. Nancy Pelosi, the stripling of 84, has criticized Chuck Schumer. And Chuck Schumer has, in fact, canceled the book tour he was going to go on in the coming days because of threats to him, not from Republicans, but from fellow Democrats. And so that's the top of the party. You go to the layers underneath that, and unfortunately for the Democrats, you see just this case after case of somebody whose career is in cinders. Governor Gavin Newsom is trying podcasting, and that's because much of the district he was meant to keep an eye on burnt to the ground a few months ago, and he didn't do very much to stop that. And so it's hard to see how a little bit of podcasting could make up for that. And it's the same all the way down the party. There are people like Don Lemon, the former CNN anchor who I mentioned in the New York Post, who claimed that the future of the party is the radical left wing of the party. But in fact, the only future of a party that those people are the future of is they are a future for the Republican Party. Because if the Democratic Party decides to take in the worst excesses of the Squad and others, then it's hard to see how the Republicans don't just continue winning for the foreseeable future.
I did very much enjoy that piece in the New York Post, very droll indeed, but it does beg the question, who is the next leader? You mentioned Gavin Newsom. He is trying to position himself as somewhat of a moderate, a centrist, point of difference from the AOCs and Bernie Sanders. What about Tim Walz? Apparently he has presidential ambitions.
Where to even start with Tim Walz? He has cropped back up in recent days. First of all, to boast about his masculinity and to talk about what a threat he believes that he, the man known as Tampon Tim, how much of a threat he was to the Republicans because of his masculinity. Odd sort of thing to be boasting about and roaring about, but there it is. That's Tim Walz. And then he cropped back up in front of some sycophants on stage and talked about how he gets happy each day by he downloaded the Share app that apparently you can have to monitor your shares. That's real man of the people stuff right there. And Tim Walz says he's added the Tesla shares to that and was celebrating Tesla shares going down. Tim Walz should look at where his shares politically are right now, and he'd see that they're close to bankruptcy. It's a really pathetic spectacle to see him doing that. The thing that they most need to do, the Democrats, is they need to actually come up with some policies and some ideas that differentiate them from the Republicans. They spent years doing Republicans are fascists, it's the end of the Republic, democracy dies in darkness, if you vote in Trump, he's Hitler and it's all over. And it didn't work. It was clearly a total political play, but it also just didn't work. It turned out the voters didn't believe them, and rightly. But what do you do in the aftermath of that? They seem to be trying a little bit of stuff out, but they're going to have to put an awful lot more meat on the bone if they're going to look like really reasonable, a respectable party of opposition. And all parties need opposition, all governments need opposition. But apart from a bit of hollering about taxing the rich, there's very little there that the Democrats have to say.
There are signs of the left's love of violence apparent again. It's really never been far away. We saw it with the BLM riots, the violent anti-Israel protests on university campuses, and the latest project seems to be attacking Tesla cars, Tesla dealerships, due to their hatred of Elon Musk. And Douglas, I've got to say, those who should know better continue to rationalise what some are calling domestic terrorism.
They do. It's a rather strange turn for people from a political wing that talks about how much they love the environment so much and how they want to protect the environment to be setting light to anything and burning it down, setting light to cars that run on renewable energy. That's a really great way to say, I heart the environment, isn't it? But yes, any political side can do this, but it's extremely dangerous stuff when you start to say, like that, if you cut federal spending, you can't expect people not to firebomb things. Really? We're going there? Why this desire to legitimize totally pointless, destructive political violence? I can only assume that some of these people are people who are very bored, as well as very unpleasant indeed. They want a great cause. They spent years, as I said earlier, saying that Donald Trump was Hitler. Now they've decided, in fact, Elon Musk is Hitler, which means you've got to burn the cars or flip the finger to people driving a certain type of car. Again, nothing shows moderation and be kind better than just swearing at your neighbors because they've got a car whose company is founded by a man whose political views you disagree with. It's astonishing, but again, this is deadly. This is kryptonite for the Democrat Party. And for people like that guy who you showed at the beginning of that clip, he's meant to be, by the way, a late-night comedian. I don't know about you, but nothing he said or says is remotely funny. He's just one of these weird new clerics who appear on American television who were hired as comedians and then come out and give a boring lecture and excuse violence and think that will get them the big laughs. And we'll see. And that's one of the reasons why people are turning off those programs. But it's quite sickening to see that, because if Republicans did that and said, well, you can only push people so far before they start executing you, I think we'd all think that was a bit rum.
I think we would. I think that we would. We saw a riot on January 6th and they were bleating about it for 5 years. But violence from their side, they seem to rationalise very easily. And you're right about those late night comics. There's a reason why their ratings are in the toilet, is because there's very few laughs. There's just lectures, and Greg Gutfeld is the big beneficiary there. Now, talking about celebrities, we've seen a number of them threaten to leave the US if Trump won. And one of them, I've got to give her credit, she followed through with it. Rosie O'Donnell is now a resident of Ireland, and she started spreading election denial there.
I question why the first time in American history a president has won every swing state and is also best friends, and his largest donor was a man who owns and runs the internet. So I would hope that would be investigated. Kamala Harris was filling up stadiums with people who supported her, and Donald Trump was not able to do that.
There you go, Douglas. Elon apparently owns and runs the internet now, and Kamala was hugely popular, so we need an investigation.
Yes, that's right. And one of the ways you can tell that Elon Musk runs all of the internet is that there are never any negative pieces or a negative comment about Elon Musk on the internet. So, as ever, Rosie O'Donnell is as sharp tacked as she ever was. Remember, this is another comedian, by the way, remember. Rosie O'Donnell. She's hilarious, isn't she? You can just feel your face cracking up with the humor whenever Rosie appears and opines on the world. As for Donald Trump not filling up stadiums, that's just bizarre, because, of course, I've been to Trump rallies. He very much fills up stadiums, very much filled up Madison Square Garden in New York and countless other places across the country. Here's one of the problems, of course, for the Democrats. Again, they can be pulled leftward by these now self-exiled comedians like Rosie O'Donnell, who, by the way, probably is having a kind of breakdown because Donald Trump was very largely elected in 2016, very largely won the Republican nomination to run for president because of his line about Rosie O'Donnell, which just got huge laughs and was hugely appreciated by people across the country. But Rosie O'Donnell and co, if they're going to do this stuff, what it really is a demonstration of denial. What the Democrats and others should face up to is that Donald Trump was and is extremely popular. He won the popular vote because he's popular. He filled up stadiums because he's popular. Sure, Kamala Harris could fill the odd hall. No one is disputing that. But if you've just lost an election to somebody, you don't pretend, or you shouldn't pretend, that person has no popularity behind him. What you should do is work out why he's got it, see what you can do to adapt to the world that you're in, and see what you can learn. See if there are policies that you might learn from. Instead of claiming that he's faked his way to it, actually adapt and learn. And so, yes, I'm not sure Rosie O'Donnell's going to be able to teach the Democrats very much from her escape in Ireland. And by the way that Ireland's going at the moment, it's perfectly possible that Rosie O'Donnell will have to move back to the States at some point soon, but that's another story.
She is in a very insular little echo chamber, because in that interview it appeared that she doesn't actually know any Trump voters. So even though more than half the country, half of voters voted for Trump, she doesn't seem to know a single one. That's Rosie for you. Before you go, just quickly, you wrote a superb piece for The Spectator about the latest attacks against Western civilization. And here we've got Britons being expected to be ashamed of their history, ashamed of things they should be enormously proud of, like Shakespeare. Even Shakespeare's birthplace supposedly should be decolonised, Douglas, because it could be used to promote white supremacy.
Yes, this is the latest report by a dimwit second-rate academic at a third-rate university who, weirdly, cooperating with the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust. And you would have thought the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust would like to celebrate Shakespeare's birthplace, but oh no, not in this era. So this second-rate academic cooperated with the Shakespeare Birthplace Trust, and she has come to the conclusion that Shakespeare's racist and colonialist, or maybe even caused the colonial era himself. It's unclear. And also that Stratford-upon-Avon is a notorious meeting place of white supremacists. And it's always struck me, Rita, as I'm sure it has you, that whatever remaining skinheads there might be, they're forever gathering at places of poetry like Stratford-upon-Avon and reading sonnets. It's one of the things I think it's one of the ways you spot them, those guys. It's so preposterous. And by the way, the important thing about this is that as I said in that piece in Spectator, it points to this central issue that we are being told in our countries, in America, in Britain, in Australia, in all the Western countries, we are being told all the time to be ashamed of our inheritance. And there's no reason to be ashamed of our inheritance. But what's weird about it is that we are being told it all the time, and it's always a one-way street. This business with Shakespeare's birthplace, they've decided that one of the things is there's too much Shakespeare at Shakespeare's birthplace. And they've decided, among other things, to introduce more of a celebrated Bengali poet called Tagore. Now, if I went to Tagore's birthplace in Bengal and said, guys, you need some more Shakespeare here, it's really not on that you haven't got another poet that you're celebrating at the birthplace of this poet, I think people would think it was rather audacious. Guess what? We in England, we in Britain also think it's rather audacious, it's rude, and to use a term, it's rather colonizing.